Welcome to Health Oddity, the show that strips away the jargon and hype surrounding all things health and fitness to help you live a long, strong and energetic life. Lining up at the bar this week, here's Peter Lant, Paul Bassett and James St. Pierre.
Hello and welcome to the Health Oddity podcast, episode 38. And we continue our 2021 run of exceptional world-class thinkers and guests today. First of all, we will say hello to my usual co-hosts, Mr. Peter Lant. Say hello.
Hello, how are we doing? Nobody ever answers that. Have you
no one answers, no.
Hello.
And Mr. Paul Bassett, how are you today, sir?
Not bad. Maybe we need a Greek chorus that kind of commentates on what we say and provides some pathos.
Okay. And we also are joined today all the way from the United States of America. I'm not entirely sure where he is. He'll tell us in a second. But the very, very special Mr. Perry Nickelston. Hello, Perry.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me on the show. First of all, thanks for calling me exceptional right out of the gate. I appreciate that. So I'll have to live up to that. And then hopefully I'll say a few smart things. So I'm actually talking to you from the northern part of the United States, just outside New York City in New Jersey.
Ah, okay, fantastic. So over on the East Coast, one of my trainers in the gym is a huge fan of Bon Jovi. So they're from New Jersey, aren't they? I think.
Oh yeah, yep. New Jersey boys. They're down. Yeah. He lives in Red Bank. Not that anybody cares, but he lives down in Red Bank, New Jersey.
Ah, yeah. So that's my trainer, Mark. Who, whenever I'm not in the gym and I walk in the gym, he's always got Bon Jovi playing. So. So occasionally I'll turn it off, but yeah, he's he
grew up with Bon Jovi. I had a best mate. He lived at my house basically. Just was obsessed with Bon Jovi. Had his hair done like Bon Jovi. Did everything. So I kind of have slight trauma. I like it. What's that?
Did he have a chest wig as well?
No, well, he had the 90s haircut. He didn't go with the 80s haircut. You know, the kind of smoother version of Bon Jovi.
Okay. Well, what I will do, guys, quickly, I just want to tell you about how I know, or just quickly sort of tee up Perry, and then I'm going to pass on to him, and he will tell you, in depth about himself and where he's from and what he's doing. And one thing that I've known Perry probably for about, well, it's definitely, I'd say 7 years, maybe 8 years, something like that. I've seen Perry talk at a number of summits and events and been to some of his lectures and things like that. And about 5 years ago, I hosted Perry at Unique Results for his primal movement chains workshop over the course of a weekend. And Perry is the founder, the inventor, or the kind of creator of Stop Chasing Pain. And I am wearing one of his hoodies at the moment, which I won at an event where I had to answer a question about 1970s bodybuilding, I think, and I got it right. And managed to win a hoodie, which was good. And one thing that you will hear as we talk to Perry is I asked before we started recording, how should I introduce you? What do you call yourself? Because he's someone who has a very different take on health and fitness and healthy living and how to get the most out of life, but doesn't really fit neatly into any box or any kind of gap or any profession. He is multifaceted. He looks very differently at things, as you will hear. There's two things that I always use now, still from Perry. One of them is the Emergent Pattern, which we will probably touch on at some stage during the podcast. We use that with lots of our members at Unique Results. We've also used the Fall Matrix a lot. Which is something else that I think Perry first showed me. And just to tee things up, one of the things he said recently on his Instagram, I read just the other day, was people think they need to feel better before moving more, when it's really the other way around. So I saw a quote from Perry, which ties in beautifully with everything that we do on this podcast. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Dr. Perry Nickelston, and he will explain, or if you can just tell us, Perry, kind of who you are, where you're from, what you do, what you're doing now, and, you know, just all the good stuff. And then we'll get into a flowing conversation with you.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you very much. I can't believe it's actually been, what, 5 years now? It feels like yesterday. It was such a fun course at your place. I think I remember telling you, you have such wonderful energy there and the way things were set up. And you definitely nailed that 1970s bodybuilding question. I forgot what it was, but I think it was maybe like, how many times did Arnold win the Olympia? And I think you nailed it pretty fast. Something like that. But yeah, you know, that's a really good question. So we were talking about it before we hit the record button of, how should I describe you? What should I say you do? And I have no idea, because people ask me that all the time, and I don't have a, what do you call a 7 to 10 second elevator speech? I don't have that, because it's like, you can't put me in a box, because I don't have one. I purposely don't live in a box. I do whatever's necessary to help another human being not suffer as much. So I'm not really big into how many initials are after your name, or where you went, or what your philosophy is, because that has to change based on the person that you're working with and whether it works or not. Because if you keep looking at something the same way, you'll always find it. You follow? So I'll be the first to drop something. When I tell people I'm a human being first, that's the lovely thing that everybody listening to this podcast is first. And there's certain fundamental things that human beings share. We want to have joy. We want to have happiness. We want to have health, right? Connection, acceptance, love. And so much of that we don't have now. Human beings are lost, you know, and I'm trying to help them not be so lost with maybe small, fundamental, basic things that we know, but we forget or we no longer practice. So I guess you would say I try to help empower human beings to live their best life, whatever that is for them, as pain-free as possible. It doesn't mean that you're never going to have pain, because that's part of being a human being. And trust me, you don't want to live in a life where you don't have pain, because you can't learn without it. If you're always comfortable, you're never going to move from where you are, because why would you? I'm perfectly happy right here. So my fundamental definition, I think, that will help people understand what I'm going to try to say today is, how do I define pain? Because I'm in the world of helping people in chronic pain, physical pain, but you'll also see the emotional, because the two never separate from each other. If you're a human being, you have emotional component to pain. That's why you're not a rock. And so it's this, because you can go down a rabbit hole of pain that you wouldn't believe. And you'll see so many different definitions of it and what it means. But here's the thing, it changes for everybody. But here it is. Pain is a request for change. And I'm going to say that one more time. Pain is a request for change. So first of all, let's break out change. What does that mean? It means you need to do something different than you're doing now. And then people always ask me, what is that? And I'm like, yes is the answer. I don't know, because you're different, may be different than somebody else's different of what you need. I just need you to do something that you don't normally do, and then see if it works. And if it works, check the win box. If it doesn't work, you can still check the win box, because now you know what it's not. You follow? But at least you move from A. So if you want to go from point A to point B, you don't have to go straight to B. The point is to just not do A. You follow?
Yeah.
And then you'll probably find your B is not what you wanted in the first place. Maybe you'll end up going to Z, right? And then the word request is really important, because when people have pain, they feel like they're being punished, and they feel resentful, and they start to resent their body or hate their body or be shameful of their body. But it's simply the body requesting that you change something different. That's why it happens slowly over time, right? I mean, very rarely will you feel pain so let's break it down a little bit. You've got like an acute trauma where you fall on your knee. I mean, it's pretty straightforward of why that knee hurts, right? And it's A equals B most of the time. But chronic pain happens different mostly, right? Is that it creeps up slowly over time, right? And then one day you go for a run and you're like, why did my knee decide to hurt me today and not the other 365 days of the year where it didn't hurt? What's up with that? But there was probably signals all along. I've got a little stiffness in my ankle, got tightness in my calf, got to stretch my quad all the time, a little slower in the morning, got to take an ibuprofen a little bit more. Those are small little requests that are like taps on the shoulder for your body saying, you're going to have to change something up here because I'm trying to give you some hints. And if you ignore me, I'm going to come in and I'm going to hurt you quick, fast, and in a hurry one day when you don't expect it. And that's the run. And so what I'm trying to do is to get people to change something, but also make it simple changes, because one of the things that prevents people from changing is the one, they don't know what to change, but two, they get overwhelmed thinking it has to be a big change. It's the complete opposite. If you do something little, it can actually expand and become ginormous. We call those habits and behaviors. Little done every day is not little anymore. That's your life. That's like a habit. Okay. So that's even if I can just change your perspective of pain like that, that automatically empowers you to have less of it.
So would you say that you've acquired a skill set to answer the multitude of questions that you're presented with? And that's why when you say you're trying to struggle to define yourself a little bit, you're not defining yourself necessarily by discipline. You're defining yourself by the humans, the people that approach you, and trying to find an explanation, because you don't always have the answer. So it's led you down different routes.
Yeah, that's a great question. My answer changes depending on the person that I'm speaking with, because there's never a cookie cutter if this, then that. It doesn't exist. If you're looking for it, you're in the wrong business. Right? Because it's context driven based on the human being in front of you. Even with the diagnosis, like I can have two people presenting to me with the same diagnosis. Let's say arthritis in your right hip. Well, doesn't mean you got the arthritis the same way. And it doesn't mean the same movements or exercises are going to be good for both of you. One may make you feel great and it may make the other person feel horrific. Now, what do? You need to deal with the human being that's in front of you. So, you know, when people come in to see me, so my degree, if you will, that's hanging on my wall that gives me permission to do therapies to you is in chiropractic. But I don't say that, what do you do? I'm a chiropractor. First of all, because you automatically go to what you think that is. And it's probably completely wrong compared to what I do. Or you go by your last experience with one, if it was great or horrific, or you had a loved one that had a great one or a horrific one. So automatically, before you know anything about me, I'm either great or I'm awful, right? So I don't do that because that's a label that's there. So I kind of tell people I'm a buffet of whatever I think you need to get well. And if I don't think I can help you, I'm going to send you to another buffet table, which means somebody else that might be able to help you. But my job, honestly, is to try to help empower you to help yourself, because you don't know what you don't know. That's why what you gentlemen do in your world is actually more important than what I do, because you're with people on the front lines and you are with them every day. Medical people are usually only with people when they're really, really bad off and they can't move anymore and they feel like they need help with it. So you guys can spot stuff early, but you help them learn what they need to for management of their life afterwards. And here's a really important thing I want to say is that there's no cure for pain. There's no cure for pain. Now, let me explain that, because a cure has an implication. That's a very powerful word, by the way, cure. It implies that you're never going to get it again. That's not possible. The only time you're never going to have pain again is when you're dead. That's not a good option. There's only management. So you manage it to where you have it or you don't. And if you get it, you try to manage it so it decreases or leaves you or alters enough that your quality of life is not so miserable. Because sometimes people don't get out of pain and we don't know why. Right? But if you can improve your quality of life a little bit, and if I can take you from a 7 on a pain scale for you to a 5, to me, that's a check the win box.
So would you say, Perry, I mean, I think that one of the issues as well with someone saying, I'm a physiotherapist or I'm a chiropractor or I'm an osteopath or whatever it is. Because when I, and like you say, as soon as you say the word chiropractor, everyone will have some point of reference that they'll go to straight away. And I think one of my point of references is that it's someone that you go and see, you lay on a table, they do something to you, like they do a manual kind of correction or a therapy to you, and they send you away, and you come back and they do something to you and they send you away. Whereby from what I have seen of working with you and listening to you and seeing you talk and things, that's certainly not what you do. I mean, I'm sure there's elements of that you bring into your personal therapy work you do with people, but I see you more as an educator of people and helping people to actually bring in movement and things, so they then actually have some ownership of their own. And again, not curing, but their ownership of making their condition better or helping with their pain and helping improving their pain. Is that kind of accurate to say?
Yeah, that's pretty good, actually. So the thing with chiropractic is they're not all the same, though. I mean, you got some people that will do that all they do is the chiropractic. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, because if you need something that's stuck to be unstuck, there's my scientific language for you. Then you do that. But I want to try to help it prevent it from getting stuck again. And that's going to come from your habits and behaviors and what you do when you get off the table and you live your life again. Right. So, but you got some chiropractors that do that, but then they've learned over time, like I did, you're going to need to do a lot more than that, probably, to have the success you want. And if you're a chiropractor and you want to do that only, well, that's when you need to build your network. And I need to call somebody like you and say, I have a client that I just moved everything that needed to be moved. Now I need you to take over and help with this, and let's work together. Or they can see the physiotherapist at the same time. There's no reason why you can't see multiple people for something. It's not a competition, because the only person who's going to lose out in that is the patient or the client. And I share this dirty little secret with people. I say, listen, everything works for someone. Which means that everything works, but it might not work for that particular individual at that particular time in their life, but it might work later on. Maybe they weren't ready to receive what you're offering yet. Okay. And here's the thing also. I love all these different professions because I truly believe that every single person who entered it, I mean, I'm not naive. I know some might not, but they get into it because they want to help another person. And they got into that probably because that helped them. Like I became a chiropractor because a chiropractor helped me walk again when I hurt my back squatting, and I wouldn't stop squatting. And or what I found is that it works the other way, that it's sometimes more powerful when that profession or therapy helps someone that you care about. Then that can sometimes be more of a motivation to learning it, to help others. All right. But we've all got the same end destination, I think, which is doing what we can with our perspective and our mindset and our perception to help another human being, like I said before, not suffer as much. But you also have to get your ego off the table and realize that maybe it's not what you're doing is not what they need. Or here's where it's even deeper. Maybe it's me they're not jiving with. Maybe I got to send you to somebody else, because that's huge, man. Like if you don't have, it in your world, there's a connection that happens between living things, not just humans, but every living thing. And you have to be attuned to that, because that can actually be one of the biggest things that prevents progress, or is a barrier that you don't see.
I mean, I'd like to think that, I have programs, and sometimes people just sign up for a short time, test the program. Yeah, sometimes they don't continue because of budget, but probably sometimes they just don't chime and gel with my approach. We don't have that connection, as you say, and it's something that we tend to ignore as personal trainers a bit, because we don't want to. It's a bit of hard truth saying actually maybe they didn't actually like what I did, and that's kind of putting your ego to one side, and it's a bit tough to go through that.
Yeah, well, I think you said it right away from what your title is. You said the word personal.
Yeah.
And that's a connection, right? And it probably got nothing whatsoever to what did I do wrong. It's not that you did anything wrong. Sometimes people connect or they don't connect. You know that. You go out in public and you can speak to somebody you never met before, and you immediately have like an attraction. It doesn't have to be a physical attraction, but an attraction where this person resonates somehow, some way. I don't know why. But then you also get around somebody and you know something in your gut is off. Or you just don't connect, or you don't like that person. Doesn't mean they're a bad person. This is something that you need to be aware of. Awareness is a big thing, but it also has a lot to do, guys, with so many different variables. It's matching the personality of the person that you're with, and learning about how they talk, how they behave, the words that they choose, their energy level and your energy level. So we tend to think that, hey, if we're all gung-ho and rah-rah and I'm going to get you there. If you got somebody who's really low on a scale of emotion and you're up here, you're automatically not going to match. You have to lower down a little. I'm not saying you got to go to their level, but you go a little bit of a notch above as opposed to here, because that can be off-putting to someone. That can be actually threatening to someone, because they're motivated, but I'm going to be honest with you, they're motivated, but they're also scared at the same time. And like Dan John, who we talked about before, he says he sees it all the time, is that, they come to you and they say, you see this person right here? That's not me. Like, you look in the mirror and you see somebody that's not you. There's a disconnect there. So in my world, or in any world like personal trainers, I have to tell people, it's never been about you. It's about them. And if what's best for them is not you, that's what they need. But here's the thing I'm going to tell you. That person's never going to forget you either, because of that fact. Like in my world, people are I'm going to keep doing whatever I'm going to do because I don't want to lose my client. First of all, that's the complete opposite mindset that you need to be in, because it's coming from a place of lack, not abundance. And if I send that person to someone else, first of all, they're usually astounded by it. And then they say, thank you very much. And guess who they tell everybody about? Go see Dr. Perry, because if he can help you, he'll tell you he will. If he can't, he'll tell you that too, and he'll send you to who he thinks you can. That's an energy transfer you can't describe. It's a quantum physics field right there. Like I'm getting into like a deep philosophical fortune cookie moment here, but you understand what I'm saying? That's big. That's big.
So what makes you pursue something then? So say someone comes in and you can't help for whatever reason, what would then make you think, hang on, I want to be able to help that person, or the next person who comes in who has got something similar? And we know it's always going to be different, but like, there can be a certain modality of treatment or whatever that you don't know about yet. So you can go, I'm going to go away and learn that. What drives you to go away and learn something new? Because you've learned, you've talked about the lymphatic system, the primal movement patterns and all of that sort of stuff. So what makes you decide, right, this is what I'm going to go away and learn next? I can't remember what the pads are called that you use.
Oh yeah, I use different. I do like energetic type medicine and too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's my incessant need or desire. I don't know if it's a need, but it's a desire to understand why. Like, okay, well, why does the body do what it does in the moment that it's in? What's the reason? It's got to be a reason. It doesn't do anything by accident. It's not stupid, right? It's just that we're stupid because we don't step back and look at it like the body. I'm trying to force my perspective on the body, and the body's, if I do something to you that your body needs and wants, you're going to get better. If I don't, then you won't get better. I mean, it's just that simple. So what I got to do is not keep hammering the square peg in the round hole. I got to step back and find out, well, maybe my approach is off, the way I'm looking at something, right? So here's how I came to this. You don't come to see me first when you have pain. I'm the guy that you see last when everybody tried everything that's supposed to work and doesn't or no longer works, because I've designed it that way. right? Because very often therapies that you do help. Like if my knee hurts and I treat my knee and it gets better, well, that's awesome. Great. But if it doesn't, maybe it's not the knee's fault. Maybe it's yours. Maybe you got to look somewhere else. And in the beginning for me, it was like, you mean I can look at the ankle and the hip and maybe that affects the knee? That's a big thing that a lot of people have no idea about, even in medicine. They keep cranking on your damn knee. And I'm like, trust me, your knee's never going to get better if your ankle doesn't move and your hip's not stable. Good luck with that, right? And then how many humans have ankles that are locked up and hips that are not stable? 99.9% of them, right? So you need to look at that first. That's a basic and a fundamental that we go that. And so I'm going to examine you. And here's the beautiful thing about my work is that I already know you've had a lot of stuff done. And I'm probably not going to do it. Because if it's what you needed, you wouldn't be standing in front of me asking me to help you because you'd already be better. But here's a lesson I've also learned. Just because you've been to all those places doesn't mean that everybody checked your basics and fundamentals either. So I used to assume that people would look at your ankle and your hip. Now I don't do it anymore because that's a mistake. Because not everybody knows the basics and the fundamentals. And how do you know what they are? That changes based on how you look at the body. That's why I look at the body in any damn way I need to. Right? I'm looking at the human being. So I tell people straight up when I see them, listen, I'm going to need to see you between 1 and 4 visits, right? Because I'm going to examine you, talk to you, assess you, and I'm going to do what I think your body is telling me that it needs. And then we're going to see what your reaction is. You're either going to feel better. Awesome. How about we do that again? You're either going to feel worse. Awesome. How about we do that again? Let me explain why I mean that, because it's changing something. And just because you get worse doesn't mean you're going to get better. And very often you're going to get worse before you get better. That's the way healing happens. It doesn't happen in a straight line up. It dips and swirls and goes opposite directions all over the map, like a kid just drew on a page. That's good too. And I have to tell them that because I need to reassure them that if they do get worse, they don't get nervous, they don't freak out and then think that, oh my God. Right? Because the longer you're in pain, the more you resist change. And then the worst thing that can happen is, and one that I absolutely don't want to see, is that you tell me nothing happened. That's the worst. Nothing happened. I'm looking for better or I'm looking for worse because I can swing the pendulum when I move it that way. And then I say, okay, well, after that, I'm going to change what I do on visit number 2. It's either going to be the same, slightly different, or totally different. And if I can't make a change with you within 4 visits to where, not that you're completely better, but there's a change and we're heading in the right direction and we can see it objectively with some of the tests and you can feel it subjectively because they always go together. If I don't make any, if you come to me after visit 4 and you say, I'm really not making any kind of changes, there will not be a 5th visit. Because I've done everything that I can in my wheelhouse on my approach, because it's going to be one visit. The first visit is going to be nowhere near like the 4th one if I can't make a change within that 4th session. So that's when I'll tell people, that's when I'm going to send you to somebody else to take a deeper look. And I'm like,
one of the things I notice is that, particularly when our clients have got injuries, and you say, so you've seen someone, they're really great. Have you done what they asked? And they go, no. So in situations like that, where you give yourself that time frame, you must be expecting quite a lot of your client to actually do what you ask them to do and say, hey, look, you're here for a reason. You're spending your money. You want to get better. By session 2, I expect you to have done this, this, and this.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's really, really important, because maybe it's not you, the trainer or the professional. I'm like, maybe the person is not doing what they're saying that they're doing. They're not carrying their load, or maybe they just don't know what they're supposed to do. Or this is even more, they don't know what they're not supposed to do.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what you don't know, right? So then I stop back and then I'll ask at that point, because I'll talk to them and say, well, what are you doing with this? And then they'll tell me. And then I can read body language pretty well, whether you're telling me the truth or not. Or then I'll just say, really? And then it'll usually crack. And then it's more along the lines of, it's not what you start doing that helps you the most, in my opinion, it's what you stop doing. That's the difference between the two.
Yeah.
Because you can add something, but if you don't, even Dan John says systems are all about what? Subtraction, not addition. Subtraction is addition that way, right? So that's really, really important when we get into it is, do you have a game plan? Here's another one. I forgot how it was. It was a Nobel laureate. I quote him all the time and I can't remember his name, but he said, if you want somebody to do something, make it simple. And if a Nobel laureate says that, that means you should listen and write it down. And very often you'll give people things to do, but it's too many things to do and they're overloaded and they won't do it because they're like, I got nowhere to, I can't do this right now. Or where am I going to fit this into my life? Or you give them too many things or their nervous system shuts down and they don't make progress because you gave them too many things to do and too many complicated things to do. And they feel like they can't do anything if you're not standing over them, watching every single move. That's very disempowering, first of all, because they feel like they're going to move wrong. I hate that phrase. There is no wrong movement to me. There's just movement that's different. Because in one context, wrong is exactly what you need to get through where you are. It's never neutral in the real world. If you go into the real world in a neutral, perfect position, you're going to lose. And you're probably going to get hurt and you ain't going to last long because you're less adaptable that way. The most successful systems in nature are the most adaptable. That means they can swing the pendulum wherever you go. And they're like, what do you got next? That's called resilience. That's why I love the stuff that you guys post up about your the different tools that you have and your Thor hammers and your cool things, because first of all, that's just fun. And second of all, you're learning to control things that people don't normally control, which is going to feed forward to them. So I don't want to get too far off tangent, but to answer your question is, you need to make sure you don't give them too many things. Don't make them too complicated because you'll immobilize them. Because a lot of people, when they come in to see you, they don't have enough belief in themselves and their capabilities to move or to heal or to get better or to change. And the other one is be there to, you're a coach. Look up what the word coach means, right? It doesn't mean tell.
Yeah.
Right?
It's one of the challenges when you're a new trainer. You're like, well, why aren't you just doing it? Just do it.
Yeah.
You do it, it works. And it's not that simple, is it?
Well, I do that because here's a pet peeve of mine, man, because I see it. When people come in to see me, they're overloaded with too many things. And number two, they get too many cues where, you have to have your hip at 30 degrees and your elbow at 5 or the movement won't work. That's complete BS. Like, if the body was like that, you would have been dead yesterday. It needs exploration. It needs play. And part of that healing process for you is freedom and empowerment to move without judgment. Yeah. From yourself or someone else. It's called play for a reason. And to me, there's no wrong way to play. Now it's going to be different if I'm going to put 1,000 pounds on my back, but that's not your average person. The average person wants to go outside, pick up their kid, go play on the beach, take a hike, bend over and tie my shoe and not have my back go out and I'm flat out for 3 weeks. What I'm going to contend is there's no way in hell you're going to be able to do all those things by following a regimented back rehab program with these 7 moves and do it this way all the time and breathe only this way. I'm going to have you start there. This is important. I'm not saying you don't do those. I'm going to have you start there. And then I'm going to have you explore the extreme. So let me give you an example. One move that is very popular in rehabilitation is where you get down, if you can, on all 4s, on your hands and your knees. Many people can't do that because they can't extend well in the wrist. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a bonus. You need to make sure that people have adequate wrist and finger mobility. Because if you're off on that, as soon as you grab a tool, you're already screwed right from the get-go in the brain and in your whole body. All right. And then you're on your knees and then your ankles are dorsiflexed. That means toes come up towards the nose. And that's a kind of a stable 6-point stabilization. So hands on the ground, knees on the ground, feet on the ground. And it's where you would crawl. I mean, you've all been there at one point. And then we get them into like a cat camel, which is where you'll sink your belly to the floor and then you'll round your back like this way. And you just explore and then you start moving your head. I'm sure Tim Anderson probably talked about cool stuff like that. And then we do what we call in my world, we call it a bird dog, but it's different things. That's where I would say, okay, I want you to point your left arm straight out in front of you, parallel to the floor, and then kick your opposite leg back, your right leg back, right? And then what we do is we look for, do they have this big, camel swag in their lower back? And they probably will, because most people have zero awareness of their pelvis and their low back. That's why it hurts. And then I'm like, okay, so that's where they want to go. That's where they are. So I meet them where they are and I take them to places they don't know about. And in our world, we really hammer on what we call neutral pelvis, where your pelvis like kind of hangs in the middle and doesn't sag too low, which means like a sway back when you're standing up. You have this big, huge sway in your lower back, or which is even more common is when you stand up, you have a flat back. So you're flat back, flat butt, no glutes, and you're in a thrusted position forward that way. So that's called a posterior pelvic tilt that way. And the other one's called an anterior pelvic tilt. So when people have you do those, they're striving for neutral pelvis. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to have somebody do a bird dog. That's where they are. Then I'm going to have them do it at the extremes of the opposite of where they are. So they can feel the difference. Right. And I need them to be able to put their arm and their leg out, no matter where the hell their pelvis is. Because when you move in the world, this is really important. Most of your movement happens subconsciously, non-conscious. 90% of it, you're not even thinking about. Only 10% is voluntary. Think about that. So, because if you had to think about every movement you do, your head would explode because it can't handle it. It's like an overload circuit that you put through something. So you want to use the 10% to start to have, that's the awareness part. And then you start to do that. But when you get out into the real world, very rarely you're going to stop and say, you know what, before I bend down and pick up this box that I got from Amazon, I need to be in a neutral pelvis. That ain't happening. So I need you to be able to pick up that box. First of all, I want you to, anytime you come across a box, I want you to, first of all, like lightly tap and kick the box with your foot. So you know what the weight is. Because a lot of times, this is a big one, people see a small box, they think it's light and they bend up to pick it up and they're not ready for it. They didn't anticipate it. Then the back goes out. So you need to anticipate your load. So just tap the box at that standpoint, right? So my point is this, is that it's not that it's like there's no chaos, there's chaos to my system. Well, it kind of is, because I got news for you. That's what life is. Life is chaos. So I'm going to try to structure it in a safe environment for you, but also you watch people relax and they're less stiff. And I forgot what, I think I watched a DVD recently. It was from like 7 years ago with Dan John, who's been on your show. I've mentioned a couple of times, being really influential for me. And he said this to me and it really hit home. He said, listen, guys, your clients don't want to look stupid. Right? Because that's self-awareness. And when you look stupid, you get tight, you get tense, you fall back into a threat. And that's huge, because I can't throw you into some movements where you feel stupid and you can't do it. Or I'm going to put you out on the gym floor and I'm going to stand you on a Bosu ball and I'm going to throw other things at your head and your face fast and say, balance. Because first of all, I'm going to scare the ever-living hell out of your nervous system. But first of all, you're going to look around and say, people are going to be laughing at me. And what I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to stand by until I'm dead, is that you did zero service for that person's nervous system. That way. So I'm not saying you can't do those, but you need to work up to those more complex movements. Because in my opinion, if you can't stand on one leg for 20 seconds with your eyes closed, your ass ain't getting on a Bosu ball for a long time, because it's too much. It's way, even though it looks great and it helps improve your balance, it may be for the right person at the right time in the right context, but not for the person who can't stand on one leg.
think I'm gonna have to come up with a new lesson plan tonight.
I like to give people, like, we call it just little wins at the end of every, especially when they're starting out. At the end of every session, you kind of start to gauge where they're at, and then you're like, right, what moves do you find difficult? What do you find easy? What can you do? What can't you do? And then you make them, without making them feel stupid, be able to do something that they couldn't necessarily do at the beginning by the end of the half hour, however long it takes, or a couple of days or whatever. And then you're like, how does that feel? And they're like, that feels really good. Right, chalk that up as a win, and we'll move from there. That's progress in one session, and it doesn't mean they're going to be back squatting 100 kilos or anything, but it's like, no, that's progress,
I really like that.
Yeah.
What did you say in the beginning? That did you say, I like to give them little wings?
Little wins.
Wins, right?
Yeah. Little wings works as well. It's almost like,
I was thinking that, dude. I mean, it's both. It's, you give them a little win box, but if you can give them those wings, right? It's just like comparing it to the bird. They don't know they can fly yet.
Yeah.
And that you have to give them that ability so you can let them go, and they can fly on their own. Right. So those wins and wings are huge, because right then and there, it's also about empowerment for people. So you have them, people will automatically gravitate doing things that they feel they do well, or they naturally do well, that they're good at. So you can, like, people who do yoga usually are really good at doing yoga, and then that's the person who now needs to get into deadlifting and heavy carries. So I need you to go to the opposite end. Then if I get somebody who can pull massive weight off the floor and carry heavy loads for long distances, then I'm going to get them into yoga. Because so now I'm going to have that pendulum swing. And taking it back to bodybuilding, Arnold Schwarzenegger was the most influential person for me in many, many different ways, especially into bodybuilding. And there's a reason he's iconic, and in my opinion, the best that ever lived. Because he innately knew stuff that we do now, and he did then. First of all, you'd see him train and squat with no shoes on, right? And he'd have shorts on, so he could see his legs and realize, dude, I better be doing calves today and not so many biceps, because not where it needs to be. And you go in any gym today, nobody shows their legs; they don't have any, and that's one of the reasons that they're weak overall, right? And in Eastern medicine, they'll say strong legs and calves. That's the key to longevity and health and circulation and chi and blood flow. And we don't have it. And he also took ballet. The classic, you've seen the picture, probably he's in front of the mirror with the ballet teacher, because he knew that was going to help him with his posing. That was going to help him with, because he also knew that the posing and the presentation was also part of your win. Right? And that also helped him get more fluid with his training. And it all ties back to what I just said when we first began. I needed to do things different. And I've tried to study the brain and pain and neuroscience, because we now know that pain is in the brain. It's all perception, which means that your pain may not be my pain. So you can't objectively quantify pain. It's not possible. It's just a subjective scale based on your life history and your perception of the world. That's why one person can have a paper cut and they're like, no big deal. Another person can have a paper cut and they're crying in the corner. Like it's not the paper cut, right? But the pain is all about that perception and what you're taking in from the world. And in relationship to pain and movement, it's really important, because people use this word right and wrong a lot, which I don't like. Okay, that's the right way to move. That's the wrong way to move. You really have to watch your language first of all, when you speak to yourself, but when you speak to another person, because words carry meaning and words carry emotion, and they'll make you or they'll break you. Plus the way you say a word, your intonation, your prosody makes a difference, right? So when studying neuroscience, I came across a phrase by my good friend Bo Lotto. He said, the brain doesn't think in terms of right and wrong. That's cultural, that's societal. Okay? The brain only thinks about utility, which is another way to say useful. It's either useful or it's not useful. If it's useful, it'll do it, whether it appears useful to you or not. So my useful may not be your useful because we were raised in a different place, different generation, right? Or the body is doing useful things, but you don't understand why it's doing it because you're in pain. But pain is also useful because pain is telling you to stop doing something because it could be way worse than it is, right? So the context is you have to step back, and then this is what I asked myself: why is the body cranking on that knee? Why does it feel it's useful? And you're like, it's not useful, it hurts. Wrong. Like, it's always useful. Even a bad habit like an addiction is useful in some way, shape, or form. To you it is, whether it seems nuts or not. Otherwise you wouldn't be doing it. Now, I know there's a chemical dependency, you follow? So it's a mixture of both. That's why you can't just take people off the chemical and then they're good. It's always both worlds that you have. So I have to always ask, why is the body choosing to do what it's doing, and why does it feel it's useful? Because I have another phrase that I use all the time, and it's really freeing. The human body is under no obligation to make sense to you. Now, if you're in medicine or science, that drives you bananas because you want to know everything. And I'm like, well, I got news for you, Sparky. You probably don't know squat compared to what the body is capable of. What we think we know is usually wrong. Like Gray Cook says it all the time. If you know Gray Cook, he says, what I'm going to teach you today is what we think is right. It may be proven completely wrong tomorrow, but we have to go with where we are at the moment. And it usually is wrong, right? But you got to start somewhere, right? So I tell people that when they say, Doc, why does this work? You're like, I got no idea why it works. I mean, maybe it works because here's an idea. Maybe it works because you think it works.
Mm.
And then
I remember a quote by a running coach who came up with a system called Pose, Dr. Nicholas Romanov, and he said, nature will not adapt to your level of skill.
Right. Yeah. Right. That's true. Exactly. Right. I love that. It's you got to level up, right? And this is we don't know why the body does what it does, but I do know one thing. It's always doing it to try to help you survive and protect you as best it can with what it's got in the moment it's in to work with. And it never stops fighting for you, even though it feels that way when you're really suffering, right? Listen, suffering is part of life, but suffering is how you learn. And death is part of life. Everybody dies. You can't put that one. You can put it off, but you can't stop it, right? And so, but it's hard to look at it that way when you're in the midst of suffering. And that's one of the reasons why I do what I do now. And I've changed the way I look at things, because I was really sick and I was on a point where I felt like I wanted to die and thought about dying, right? And giving up, but I knew I had to flip this switch, and otherwise I was just going to keep going down into the quicksand. So when I tell people that, I say, listen, I know your back has been hurting you for 5 years, and it's probably at this stage, who knows if it's even biomechanical. Most of the time it's not. But there's a reason that it's happening. We just have to keep digging and finding what's the reason why, right? And then that's also can be very empowering, that you can have that, you can make a change in there. So I tell people with the back, I'm like, well, okay, well, you've been cranking on the back for a year and you've had back surgeries and you do ice and heat, you do all these corrective exercises. I'm like, maybe it ain't your back. Like, first of all, I usually tell people, I use the word pendulum a lot. I want you to do the exact opposite of what you're doing now. So when they say, if it hurts in my back and I treat the back, I'm like, now what I want you to do is flip you over and I want you to do everything to the front. And they say, but it doesn't hurt there. I'm like, congratulations, now you're catching on. That's what stop chasing pain means. It doesn't mean don't treat pain. It means don't chase it, right? Because you want to go with where it hurts because it hurts. And people expect, I go to where it hurts more so for your sake, because you expect me to treat where it hurts. But I know in my world, that's probably not it. But you're not ready to hear that yet. You haven't gotten to the Obi-Wan Kenobi moment yet. You're just Yeah. You haven't crossed over to be a Sith Lord yet. You don't see it.
That's so interesting, Per, because I was going to ask you, there was two questions that have come up while you've been talking. The first one was the stop chasing pain. The thinking, the thinking and the thought process behind that, and where that came from. And the first one, and the other one was kind of, you are such a unique character and a unique way of looking at things. And I wanted to know a little bit maybe about your background, and you've mentioned, injury and pain and that sort of thing, but how you used to train when you were younger, and what kind of led you to, go on this sort of lifelong journey that you seem to be on, so I wouldn't imagine you were maybe as you are now in your 20s. I mean, I may be wrong, but it seems like you may have, kind of evolved and gone on a journey yourself. So I just wondered if you could maybe tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, you kind of gather wisdom. It doesn't necessarily happen with age unless you learn from some of your things. I did a lot of stupid things, man, and a lot of mistakes, but I also began to learn from my mistakes and realize that that's the only way that I'm ever going to get better. But step back and not beat myself up because I made a mistake, but really look at the lessons that it's trying to show me that you don't always see because you're so ashamed of making a mistake. But I'll get back to that, but I'll talk about where the Stop Chasing Pain name came from. And I really like sharing this story because when I first started out in chiropractic, I did what you just initially mentioned, where I would do chiropractic treatments to people and then they would get off the table, and then I would see them 2 more times that week. And then people would get better, but it wouldn't stay better. And I unfortunately worked in some practices that didn't have a lot of integrity, and everybody got the same treatment program, for everything. And I'm like, this is inherently not what I want to do. And I actually wanted to build the kind of practice where you didn't feel like you had to come back, you wanted to come back. And I said, there's got to be more to it than that. And I started to branch out, and that's when I began to work with movement and working with more soft tissue, less joint stuff. And I remember I was looking on Amazon once, trying to look at some training books, because my background is in training. I've been into bodybuilding since I was 14 years old. Like I was always about the shape in the body, and I did bodybuilding competitions and lifting, and it was my life. It was great, but it was also not so great because it had a way that world can be very dark, where it's all about aesthetics and your self-worth is how you look in a mirror and whether you win a trophy. And I'm being compared to everybody else. And I realized I didn't have genetics for what I needed to do. And so I said, okay, well, I'll just work around genetics. I'll just take anabolic steroids, problem solved. Wrong. So it's not going to change your genetics. And it messed me up in a lot of different ways, mentally and physically. But it was also part of the journey that led me to really understanding what I do now and working with trainers in the fitness world and movement, because it's what I do. And I initially got hurt doing bodybuilding and squatting. And I did what most people do when they're 19 and 20. You get hurt and you just keep going. Yeah. No pain, no gain. Pain is weakness leaving the body stuff. And there's a time and a place for that stuff, right? I mean, if you're on the battlefield, that's who I want carrying my ass back, right? But there's also a place when it needs to go the other way. And I just kept pushing through and ignoring it. Then went to a chiropractor, and he got me to stand again. And I'm like, well, that's kind of cool. I think maybe I'll do that. And then that's what I decided to do. But I started to branch out, looking outside of where the pain was. And I came across a book on Amazon by Gray Cook, Athletic Body and Balance, his very first fundamental book on what he teaches, called I know there's not a lot of people maybe in the fitness world that it's called the functional movement screen. It's just movements that I can see you perform that will give me an idea about maybe your possibility of injury or how comfortable you feel moving your own body in space and time. It happens to be one of my favorites to do. And I got it. And I came across this phrase. He said, we treat non-painful dysfunction. I'm like, what the heck is that? And basically it means it doesn't hurt, but it doesn't function well, which means it doesn't move well. So it maybe is locked or it's not stable, right? And it's usually not where the pain is. That was the big takeaway from me. And then once I started treating like that with my therapies, I was like, wow, this is like making a huge difference for me, right? Even the stuff on the table. So say, for instance, your knee hurt. In the past, I would just laser your knee, which is a form of light therapy to help pain. You get better, but now I started to laser the knee and the hip. You follow? So then I would do above and below, and then the knee would feel better. And I actually reached out to Gray, left a message for him on an email, and then he called me like 2 days later and introduced himself to me, and I was like a huge moment. And I went to one of his courses, and what showed up on a slide in 3 red words: stop chasing pain, just in a basic font and a white screen. And it was one of those, like, you know, I came to the top of the mountain and I found my wisdom moment, like, aha, the gates opened up, and I'm like, that's it. It's just a moment that, you know. And I always joke around with him because he said, and I immediately stopped listening to what he was saying. And I went on the internet and I said, is that domain name available? And it was. So I snagged it while he was talking. .com, .net, .org. And then afterwards, you know, it's like, you do what you got to do and ask for forgiveness later. That's kind of what it was. And I said, can I use the name? He said, absolutely. And then I ran with it from that point. And then that's what kind of became what's on your shirt there. And that was my journey into getting into that. And then when I started to wear that shirt, people said, that's a great name, man. Like it just resonates. So it doesn't mean stop treating it. It just means don't chase it. Chasing it means it moves here, you treat here. It moves there, you treat here. The pain only tells you that there is a problem. It doesn't tell you what it is or where it is. That's why we get lost, right? So we need to move beyond that. Pain is a request for change. But then that also brought me back to my world of bodybuilding and fitness, because my offices for the last 20 years have been inside fitness centers. I love that world. I love the energy. I love that people are going in and they're trying to do something different with their life. And plus, it's a great business model because people get hurt there all the time. It just sort of worked out that way, right? And but my rehab equipment is there too. I don't have to invest in rehab equipment. Take them out on the gym floor. People see me doing stuff on the gym floor, and then they say, "Hey, what's that? Who are you? Can I come see you?" Sort of thing. And then I walk the talk. I train and move and do stuff every single day. So what's changed? I'm 54 years old, and I move and feel better now than I did when I was 24. Because when I was 24, I was just more into, now you got to remember that the fitness industry has changed a lot since I was in there. I mean, functional training, nobody even heard of that word until Paul Chek came around. I was just like, okay, bodybuilding was fitness. And in some ways it still is, honestly, because it's all about how you look on the outside, which has no correlation to how you move or feel on the inside. And so I went with that world, and I got hurt a lot, man. I was very stiff. And I was very linear too. It was a lot of seated stuff. It was always push, pull. I can't remember if I rotated at all to do anything. What the hell is that going to do for my double bicep pose on stage, right? Now I know different with the slings. But through that education process of seeing people in pain, but also through my own of like, I am not feeling well. And I don't think I'm moving well. And I went to a Gymnastica Natural course. You know what that is? That's from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with
one of my instructors is one of the she's certified in the system, so she delivers it.
Yeah. And then so many different systems spawn from it, right? But I went into that course and I'm like, oh my God, how am I still alive? I can't move at all. They had me do like a frog move going across the floor. I'm like, dude, I don't have any motion in my hips. This is disgraceful. And after 45 minutes, I felt like I went through a Murph workout on CrossFit. I was dead on the floor, man. But I felt so good. And from that moment on, it changed everything. And that's what got me into more body weight movement, learning to control my own body mass and strength. Because I'm like, if you can't control your own body mass on the ground and off the floor, one, you're going to get hurt when you stand up and you move on 2 feet. But two, I'm going to say that I don't think you reach your full potential of the strength that you do when you're on 2 feet. They complement each other. And my endurance went up, my resilience went up, my mental capacity went up, and I got stronger with everything else. And I had fun and I loved it. And I've been doing it ever since. And then I got into the stuff with my friend Mike Fitch, who does Animal Flow. And I do Budokan martial arts, like with Cameron Shane and all of those things. And I just say, you know what, that's when I want to get on the ground. And then you get into a flow state. And where should I move next? Yes, that's the answer. Just be in the moment, be here now, feel like where you want to go, move around. And then when I started to try to teach those fundamental positions for rehabilitation, I realized that highly trained fitness people couldn't do them. And if they can't do them, then it's most likely that average human being, I hate the word average, but other human beings can't do it. And maybe if I get them to do a basic and a fundamental down on the ground and bring them back towards fundamental patterns, because it can help everything else, right? And that's why I do primal movement or ground-based patterns. And like, listen, to me, when you stand up and you carry heavy things, like Dan John says, that's probably the quickest way you're going to transform your life, is to pick up something heavy and carry it from point A to point B, because you don't do it now. And then another one is, I want you to get on the ground and roll. And you're like, which way? Yes. Sideways, back and forth, diagonals. To me, that's a loaded carry on the ground. It's going to change your life. It's going to completely change your life. And one, because you don't do it now, but two, you originally started out there developing your nervous system and your stability, and your nervous system never forgets anything. And when you go back and you do it again, you light up pathways in your brain you forgot you had. And then all of a sudden, when you stand up and you're like, Doc, that's the craziest thing in the world, but when I'm doing the rolling patterns, I feel like I run faster and I have less pain. Does that make sense? Of course it does, when you understand how everything is interconnected, right? And then if you can roll around on the ground and just play like that, I'm going to contend it's way more powerful than doing a plank. I have a novel idea. How about you roll and then do a plank, and then get off the plank and then roll again and do another plank? You're going to be a hashtag beast mode badass monster. That's what you're going to be. Right? That makes sense?
Yeah,
that makes perfect sense. James has already mentioned it, the get back up series, where, you know, for people listening, it's you just get on the floor on your back and then get back up, get on your front, get back up, get on each side, get back up. It's, you know, that's it. And then you add like a mobility blockage, don't you? I use that on people all the time, just like warm-ups and stuff like that, getting to do it, you know, at home. And they're just like, oh man, like you can feel your abs, you can feel your obliques, you can feel everything. And they're like, how does that happen? It's like, because, you know, you're finding different ways to get up off the floor. And it's,
I'll tell you what, it takes enormous strength to arise from the floor with your own body. And listen, most people don't go down to the floor on purpose. You're usually only down there when you fall, which when Dan John, I'm going to say it again, he'll tell you that, you know, falls decrease the lifespan of the elderly people. You usually die within 5 years after a fall, but humans don't fall well. I see people get, you know, fall, even kids, and they get hurt, right? So it's no joke when you fall. But it takes huge strength to get off the floor, but people just don't do it. And I will say that I'm going to give props to a couple of people for this one. So I first saw that series from Gray Cook and Dan John teaching at a Perform Better Summit once. And I said, that's the most brilliant thing I've ever seen. And then I saw it again with a mentor of mine who's an osteopath and acupuncturist in New Zealand named Dr. Philip Beach, who's very influential for me. And he teaches lots of, he calls them erector sizes, like erecting from the ground, erector sizes. And I just put a different name on it. I call it the Fall Matrix, because I love the Matrix movie and it's about falling. And it's just a simple premise, man. It's actually based on a Brazilian study that they did in Brazil once, where they looked at, can somebody go down to the ground and back up again without using their hands, knees, elbows, or anything? Can you just go butt, but in our world, we call it ass to grass. Can you get your butt on the ground? I think I did it in the primal movement course when we did. Can you go down to the ground and back up again without holding on to anything or touching anything to get up? And if you're unable to do that, or the more things you have to hold to get up, it's a barometer for the likelihood that you'll actually die sooner, because you can't move well or you can't control yourself well. So that's actually one of the fundamental assessments that I do for people, depending on their level of pain. Because here's what I'm going to contend. If you have pain that's chronic, I already know you can't get off the ground. I'm going to say that's why you got pain. Pardon me. And so I'll have somebody go down to the ground and I'll see if they can do that. And most people can't do it, right? Because there's no wrong way to do that either. There's just different ways to do that. But Philip Beach said in his work that he said, if you can go down to the ground and back up again many, many different ways, 50 times a day, you'll virtually eliminate the likelihood that you'll have low back pain. And I believe it because I do it all. Listen, for somebody who doesn't do that, they do 5 and they're wiped out. If you do, you don't have to do 50 at one shot. I mean, you can if you're a gladiator, but otherwise you can do, 5 or 10. And let's put it into context. I have an idea. How about you roll on the ground a little bit, then do a plank and then get off the ground and go back down and do it again. So now you're mixing all those together, right? And I got news for you. You're going to feel a difference, right? To me, true strength, that's actually the true strength, is being able to control your own body mass in any environment that you get in. And we don't do that anymore. We always look for something outside to hold and control, to push and pull, and you should. But the up and down to the ground again is so restorative. It's very primal. And you mentioned, James, before about the emergent pattern, right? So the emergent pattern, this is a crazy universe thing, man. I just posted that up on my Instagram channel last night before I went to sleep. The emergent pattern. And it's just basically going from a tall position, kneeling position on your knees, to one leg forward over and over and over again. And that's not easy, man. And I have people that like, that's hard to do. I'm like, I know it is. That means you need to do it, right? But if you do that and then stand up like that, those erectorcises are designed to give you that fundamental motion that you need to use the opposite arm and leg. But it really builds up a lot of stabilization, which is control, and your hips and your pelvis to come forward. Now, not everybody can do it because some people can't put the pressure on the knees. They might have to put a pad up underneath. Some people can't get the requisite flexion in the knee, which means your hamstring, the back of your leg, comes close to your calf, or you've had replacements in your hip or your knee. So you might be might not be able to, but it's something that you maybe should try and see what happens for you. I guarantee you that if you do 25 of those things, you'll have a come to Jesus moment with yourself if you do that.
One of the things that I was thinking about while you're talking, hopefully this question will kind of manifest itself while I'm saying it, is, I remember listening to an interview with another coach. His name's Christopher Summers, who runs the Gymnastic Bodies, and it's what I can probably imagine policemen experience. Now, policemen, they work with criminals all the time, and so it takes a certain mind to not see the world as criminals. And he worked with young gymnasts who had freakishly crazy, abilities, because of, they've been trained from the ages of 6 to become these Olympic athletes or at least national contenders. So for you, you're seeing people in a variety of different injury patterns and pain patterns. How do you step back from that and really evaluate what people can do? And I mean, what is your perspective on the human body, having spent many, many years dealing with pain, which could quite easily color your idea of what people experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, people tend to gravitate towards things that, like I said before, they're good at or you're talented at, right? And something get groomed for it from an early age. Like ever since I was 5 years old, I was in a pool, and Michael Phelps wasn't going to be a baseball player. You follow? The guy's a damn fish. So some things that you're just designed for and that you can run with, that you got genetics and you got talent and you're naturally good at it. And sometimes in that world, you'll find people actually that they just rely on talent and they don't do their other skill set. And I'm like, dude, you realize how much better you could be beyond just your talent? Not to mention that you'll probably be able to do what you love longer because you can increase your durability based on your training. But that being said, there's so much that goes into what I would do with a client where I can have an exercise that I think may be good for them to do, but I don't think they're ready to do it yet because they feel like they can't do it yet, or there's too much fear or anxiety for them to do it. It's a really hard question for me to answer in some ways because it's individual driven and context driven. So that's why people message me all the time on Instagram saying, Doc, I got some pain in my hip. Are there exercises I can do for that? No, I don't know anything about your hip. I can't give that to you. I just don't know. But that's why I always talk, but to get to the answer that I think will suffice for your question, at least in my mind, is I talk about basics and fundamentals for a reason, right? It's kind of like learning to read. You have to know your ABCs before you can put them together with small words like see, spot, run, it, cat. And then you read the cat in the hat, and then you can work up to full sentences, and then you can work your way if you want to read Shakespeare. Right? But you can't start somebody off with Shakespeare because maybe they can read Shakespeare, but they look to you and said, I have no freaking idea what I just read. I don't know what it means. Right? And that's the way exercises can be for somebody. So I always go back to fundamentals. Nature's pretty smart. She's not stupid. And nature started moving you on the ground with patterns. Some I've already mentioned, and I know Tim Anderson talks about it. He talks about original strength. Well, what does original mean? It's the OG, right? And so, you didn't pop out of your mom running a sprint. You were on the ground and you started to do patterns that you thought were like, there's no rhyme or reason to those patterns. There's always a rhyme or a reason to it. But I get you into things that are basic, like rolling to your left, rolling to your right, rocking forward, rocking backward, getting on your stomach and just kind of turning your head or moving your head or crawling or moving and things like that in conjunction with some of the other things, right? But here's the thing that is going to tie in something I talked about before. I have to know when to introduce that or where to introduce that, because some people, they're not ready for going down to the floor because it looks stupid. I'm paying you to do this, or they feel uncomfortable being down on the floor. So some of the movements I might have to elevate up and do it on a table, or try to do some of these patterns standing up for them as best I can. And then get them comfortable of tiptoeing in. And people will usually do things, one, if they're simple, or two, if they see it makes a difference. So what I usually do for people is I'm like, okay, you have a problem doing, a pain. Let's say you have a little bit of discomfort raising your right shoulder up over your head, or you're bending over to touch your toes. So that's an assessment that we go through. And then I'll do an intervention and I'll say, okay, let's get you down on the ground and let's just try to cross your arms in front of you like a mummy, and let's just roll this way and roll that way, and then rock back and forth. And then I'm going to say, okay, let's stand you up and then move your shoulder and bend over again. And then they'll go, that actually feels a lot better. Right. And then you got a little bit of a buy-in on there. But here's the one thing that I have found in my working with people in chronic pain or anything. If they've hit a plateau or they're struggling, 100% of the time, they're missing a basic or a fundamental somewhere in the process. And for me, it's like primal movements down in there. And another one it might be just this. People come in to see me and say, I got this whole complex problem, man. I got this back program. This is the best thing you'll ever see, right? It's like 6 weeks long. And then I'm asking somebody before I even do that, I'm like, you drink water? No. I got news for you, man. That back program ain't going to do squat. I need you to drink water. I need to hydrate yourself. That's a basic, that's your A, B, C, D, C spot run song. Then if I get you to drink the water, then I'll move you into the other stuff. So I have to check those basics and funnel. I know there's a long answer, like a huge circle, but it has to be, because there's never one answer with things like this in relationship to it. But I go back to basics and fundamentals, and then usually have people do things. Here's a novel idea. the brain likes it when you do different things because it gets bored quick. And one of the reasons that you feel better when you start any movement program is because you're moving and you're doing something that you don't normally do. It's really not rocket surgery at all. That's Mark Rifkin's line, which made me crack up. But yeah, it's just do things that you don't normally do, and you'll usually get some results. And it's funny because when I post videos up, people just sometimes think too much and they overanalyze things. And they're like, how many reps should I do? How many sets? And I say, yes, just play. And I said with the Emergent Pattern, I said, do it 25 times. And I purposely put after that, I made that number up because I knew somebody would say, why 25? It's not the number. It's the motion, it's the movement. And that I want you to do 5 one time. I want you to do 2 one time. Right? You just don't think so damn much because you're going to freeze and immobilize yourself. Effective things don't have to be complicated. And the solution doesn't have to be complicated to work, because who in the hell said that something has to be complicated to get you where you need to be? And you guys probably think I'm in love with Dan John, but I sort of am. And he goes in a podcast once that I had him on, he said, people don't realize how difficult it is to make something simple. But if I'm making it look simple to you, that's because I spent a lot of work trying to make it that way for you. But the simple things make the biggest difference. Because once you understand just human behavior, and when somebody's trying to get from, first of all, there's so much information out there. People got no freaking idea what to do with it. They're not lacking information. They're lacking, hold on for this one. This is really important. They're not lacking information. They're lacking meaning. Because the information isn't going to change somebody. It's the meaning of the information that's going to change somebody. And that comes down to the relationship that you're really going to have with somebody. And like, why am I doing it? The meaning of it. Facts are not going to change habits and behaviors. You can think it is all damn day, but it's not. It's the story that somebody tells themselves about the facts that you're telling them that gives you the results that you want on that, right? Just look at politics. A Democrat, at least in the US, because we're exploding from the zombie apocalypse over here. But if you have something that you see, it's a fact that it's happening, but a Democrat and a Republican will give you 2 completely different reactions to it. So it's not the fact. It's the story that you're telling yourself about the fact. It's not the exercise. It's the story you're telling yourself. I can't do that. It always hurts. You just told yourself a story.
So where
that makes sense?
Yeah. Is your job to change the narrative then, if anything?
Yeah. I like to say not so much change it, but just show them, make them the awareness that they can change it. Because you can't change something until you become aware of it. So a lot of times when I also, because I love to share information on Instagram, right? And I'll put something up and then people say, well, what do I do about it? The point of my post is not to tell you what to do about it, because I can't tell you what to do about it, because it's going to be different for everyone. And it might not be what you need. The point of my posts are for one reason: awareness, for you to go, holy cow, I never knew that I should look at an ankle that doesn't move to help my knee. How can I move my ankle? Yes, is the answer. I say, go. I told somebody, I said, go to YouTube, type in ankle mobility and pick one, because they're all almost virtually the same, and see if it works. I'm more of an awareness guy to help you see things that you don't see, or maybe see it in a different way, and that you can go from there, because your techniques and your methods are endless, right? You can choose 1,000 of them. It's the principle, it's the concept that I want you to get. Because once you understand the concept, then you insert method A, technique B, or whatever. So when I teach lymphatic work, for instance, I teach a lot about the lymphatic system for health, recovery, regeneration, performance, not dying, that kind of stuff. And then people say, what what's the best tool, or how many times should I do it? I'm like, lots of different ways. I just need you to know that it's a system you should be looking at, and then play with it from there. There's no just one way to do anything. And that's a pet peeve of mine with exercises or movements or routines or anything. It's my friend Joanne Elphinston, who's a physical therapist, calls it the 3 V's, that like in victory: variation, variability, and variety. You know what another word for that means? Different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Change. That's what it means. Change, difference, not the norm. The brain adapts very quickly to things, and it craves novelty. It always looks for the shiny. You guys see it all the time, right? I mean, I've been doing this routine for a week. You got anything different? Like it looks for something shiny that stands out, right? And that's why cool things like that you have with your tools that I see posted up, it's very novel to that. And that makes a difference on instilling a desire to want to do something, a pleasure to do so. I got news for you. If I'm going to be swinging something around and learn to control a mass, I'm going to have way more fun holding Thor's hammer than I am a kettlebell, right? Or whatever, or a dumbbell, for instance. It's a little bit different, but you follow that kind of thing, what I'm saying?
Yeah. I think this is fantastic, Perry. I've realized we're probably about an hour and 20 in, so I think we'll kind of start to wrap up now. But it's been absolutely amazing having you with us, and we'd absolutely love to have you back on again, maybe to talk about something like the lymphatic system, or now that people know who you are and have been thoroughly introduced to you. I'm sure people will love to hear more of what you have to say. Let me just go round and just Pete, do you have anything you'd like to say in conclusion, or any other questions you'd like to ask Perry?
I've got too much, but there was one thing right at the end there when Perry was saying just yes is the answer to everything, like pretty much everything. I've put posts out before because I talk to guys and girls who have got no time, and it's like, if you haven't got much time, you can, try this, and I've the Emergent Pattern or the Fall Matrix or whatever. And people will go, I get the odd snarky comment, I've got 5 minutes a week. And it's like, well, do it then. You know what I mean? That's it. But your problem, like you were saying, your problem then isn't doing the thing. Your problem is you've only got 5 minutes a week, which isn't true. So you need to sort that out. But anyway, that's like loads of other takeaways from that. But that was just one thing right at the end. And it's just been great. Every time I listen to Perry talk, or I've been to one of your workshops, it's like I can come away with all the stuff that you've said before cemented into my brain again, but then with just some little pearls afterwards as well. And that's just one of the things you've said, like doing something is better than doing nothing. And it's, it doesn't matter what it is to begin with. And I love that.
Well, thank you very much for that. Yes is a very powerful word.
Yeah.
And so is no.
Paul, do you have anything? Do you have a final thought or any final things you'd like to say?
I mean, really interesting. I mean, it's a great podcast to have had. I know that it was Tim Anderson last week, so it does tie in really well with Tim, because Tim, anyone's who listened to that podcast that we did, Tim has a very similar viewpoint on how to get people back moving and that primal movement perspective. And obviously, as a trainer, he's taken it from that perspective. But we had Steve Maxwell on the week before, and Steve obviously has been in BJJ and got himself injured and seen so many injured people, and it's kind of it's changed the way he thinks about training. And he had some really interesting and somewhat controversial views on how people should train. Mm-hmm. But I think what I really like about what you said is this idea of narratives, and it's played and storytelling, because I think that's been a big part of my own journey, particularly kind of negative thoughts around kind of what I can do, what I'm able to do, and we all have this self-doubt. And I think is one of those big things that we offer, as particularly as trainers and healthcare professionals across the board, is is to have that compassion, and it is to have that understanding of the individual, so that we can be part of opening different avenues to change. Because we get quite fixated on the information that's out there, the modalities, the techniques, but there is this kind of this storytelling, this narrative that an individual comes with, which we've got to get to the bottom of. And that's really where the trust is built. And I think that's where the healing takes place, because otherwise you can just see people as a series of injuries, and it's never that simple. And so I think it's been a really interesting perspective for me. I feel a bit smug that some of the things I've been doing, with my clients, but I'm not going to boast, but it's been really, 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 really good. I'll leave everyone on this note. Sing like no one's listening and squat like no one's watching. Anyway, I just had to get that one in.
Nice, very nice.
And it was lovely, I think, when we kind of brought it back round to where we started, which was that people think the quote that I quoted from you that I saw the other day, which was that people think they need to feel better before moving more, when it's the other way round. So I think that the way you brought that round was absolutely perfect. Thank you so much, Perry. If people want to find out more about you and want to follow you and maybe want to delve into what you do more deeply, where's the best place for people to kind of connect with you online and that sort of thing?
Yeah, well, thank you very much, gentlemen. It's really easy. If you just type in "stop chasing pain" in your search engine, a lot of me is going to show up, and hopefully all the good stuff shows up first. And you can find me on social media. I'm on all the major platforms. So stopchasingpain.com is the website. But I do spend most of my time, and some may say an unhealthy amount of time, on Instagram, because it's my favorite format of sharing and just learning and communicating with people. But if you go to stopchasingpain.com, you'll see links to, we got a couple of things to keep you busy there. Let me say that.
Okay. Thank you so much. And we'd love to have you back on in the future to delve more into to some of what you do, if you'd be happy for that at some stage.
Oh, I would love it. I think that we reached what I call the flow state here, which means that time just kind of stands still, because I can't believe that it's actually 9:45 my time here. It went by in an instant. So I really had a great time, and very thoughtful and thought-provoking questions, which I really enjoyed quite a lot. And hopefully your listeners maybe got a few different perspectives on different things. That's why I use this phrase all the time, but you can check a win box there, I hope.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Perry. So please, guys, if you've enjoyed what you've listened to today, please do like, please do share, please subscribe to the channel on whatever platform you're listening to. And also, if you're able to, on the platform you're on, please do leave us a review as well. Next week, we've got a special show with myself, Peter and Paul, where we're actually going to be kind of reviewing and reflecting on some of our recent guests and the journey we've had so far in our coming up 40 episodes of Health Oddity. And we'll also have some exciting news to tell you about some things that we've got in the pipeline for you as well. And then we'll be back with more fantastic guests after that. So just want to say thank you very much, guys. We will see you next week, and hope to see you very, very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Health Odyssey with Peter Lant, Paul Bassett, and James St. Pierre. To get your regular fix of hype-free health, you can subscribe and leave a review wherever you get your favorite podcasts. You can find out more on today's and other topics at healthodyssey.com, or find us on Facebook or Instagram by searching for Health Odyssey.